Venezuela sees the closing campaign rallies ahead of Sunday's regional and municipal elections. Brazil's Supreme Federal Court issued a 5-day deadline to Jair Bolsonaro's government to address the adverse health situation and malnutrition suffered by the indigenous Yanomami people. Anti-coup protests continue in Sudan despite heavy repression that's left 39 protesters dead so far. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. Venezuelan Foreign Minister Felix Plasencia condemned the interference of the United States and the European Union in the country's internal affairs in the run-up to the regional and municipal elections of November 21st. The top diplomat reiterated that Washington refuses to recognize the government led by President Nicolas Maduro, legitimately elected by the Venezuelan people. Plasencia also called on the Biden administration to schedule a dialogue with the Venezuelan government on the basis of mutual respect and between equals, as sovereign states should behave. He also rejected the extension of sanctions imposed by the European Union against government officials and the renewal of unilateral coercive measures contrary to international law, as well as statements attacking the country's electoral system ahead of Sunday's vote. The National Electoral Council of Venezuela stated that the schedule for the regional and municipal elections of November 21st has developed as planned in an environment of political stability. On the last day of the electoral campaign, the president of the Electoral Authority, Pedro Calzadilla, presented the International Observation Plan in the presence of at least 300 delegates from the different missions deployed throughout the national territory in order to accompany and observe Sunday's electoral process. Calzadilla pointed out that the presence of the European Union represents recognition of the country's electoral authority and defined the process in the lead-up to the regional and municipal elections as a success and a major achievement. Calzadilla also ruled out the possibility of fraud in the upcoming elections.
It is not impossible to fabricate or invent this. We are pleased to know that we, as the National Electoral Council, have contributed to this environment of political stability, of full political freedom. This is a country of liberties, a deeply democratic country.
The president of the Venezuelan Electoral Authority also confirmed the closing of electoral campaign activities.
The election campaign ends today at 11:59 or at 23:59. The election campaign closes today, on Thursday 18th, as established by law, on the eve of Sunday 21st. We must not forget to always state and highlight that on Friday 26th, the elections of indigenous peoples will be held. From today, there is electoral campaign ban. On Friday and Saturday, the electoral campaign is suspended. It is up to us to make a call to the organization with political purposes, to candidates, to refrain from disseminating messages that violate electoral regulations in order to reach Sunday in good conditions. A little more than 21 million Venezuelan men and women are registered in the electoral roll.
Venezuela's electoral schedule moves forward as planned ahead of the regional and municipal elections set to take place this Sunday. The elections for indigenous representatives in 8 of the nation's states will take place on November 26. Our correspondent Brian Meir brings us details on the preparations ahead of Sunday's vote.
This Thursday, over 356,000 troops were deployed as part of Phase 2 of Operation Republic, designed to guarantee the integrity of the electoral process and the safety of 14,262 voting centers, the candidates, the public, and around 300 international election observers from 55 countries.
The Bolivarian Armed Forces will work with the Electoral Commission to guarantee Article 5 of the National Electoral Law. It will guarantee the safety of the voters and guarantee the safekeeping of the electoral materials throughout the entire nation.
Together with the armed forces, 1,090 members of the Public Prosecutor's Office will oversee the electoral process. In all, over 500,000 people are involved in the management of the elections, including committee organizers, members of local electoral boards, and the technical and operational staff of the National Electoral Council.
This election on November 21st represents an important event in the life of the Republic. Elections represent the moment in which citizens congregate in all of the voting centers to guarantee the principle of popular sovereignty. It is an expression of republicanism which enables the people to decide on their collective destiny.
Election officials say that 90% of the scheduled tasks to guarantee smooth elections have already been carried out. Today, 18 tests will be conducted on the electronic voting system, and on Friday, over 30,000 electronic voting machines will be installed across the country.
We guarantee to the electorate that these machines are only operating with a system that was installed by the National Electoral Board and that they fulfill the requirement of registering votes. This is why this external auditing process is so important. It gives security to the voters.
International groups that have sent election observers to Venezuela to monitor Sunday's elections include the Carter Center, the Network of Intellectuals in Defense of Humanity, and the European Union, which is back for the first time since 2006 with a team of around 100 observers.
So far, there are no problems with any institution. Everything is developing as in any other electoral mission.
As the campaign season comes to a close, millions of Venezuelan citizens are looking forward to yet another opportunity to exercise their democratic right to vote. Brian Mir, teleSUR, Caracas.
And we'll be right back after this very short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. This Wednesday, Brazil's Supreme Federal Court issued a 5-day deadline to Jair Bolsonaro's government to address the adverse health situation and malnutrition suffered by the indigenous Yanomami community, especially affecting children. The court order responds to a complaint from the Sustainable Network Party and the Federal Public Ministry, demanding the Bolsonaro government guarantee the protection of life, health and safety of the indigenous community. Judge Luis Roberto Barroso also determined that the government must report on the nutritional situation of the Yanomami children, as well as provide them with solutions for access to drinking water, sanitation and medicines. The Attorney General's Office of Colombia has charged police officers for homicides that occurred during the national strike mobilizations of early 2021. The office summoned 3 Colombian policemen to appear in court this Wednesday to be charged with aggravated homicide for incidents that took place during the national strike, which lasted almost 3 months and saw violent acts of repression perpetrated by the security forces against demonstrators. According to a joint report by the non-governmental organisation Temblores and the Institute for Development and Peace Studies, during the national strike mobilizations, there were 1,649 arbitrary detentions, at least 346 forced disappearances and 41 homicides allegedly committed by the National Police.
The Attorney General's office will charge Colonel Edgar Vega Gomez, operational commander of the Santiago de Cali Police, Lieutenant Nestor Mancilla, commander of the GOVT that also operates in Cali, and Patriot Wilson Orland Esparragosa for the crimes of aggravated homicide related to the deaths of several people in Siloé, Calypso and Puerto Resistencia during the day of protests. There, members of the National Police and of the GOVT fired their firearms at the demonstrators. The victims' representatives have asked the judge to summon these police officers so that they can also request a measure of protection, and in the same way they have also asked the judge to summon these police officers so that they can also request a measure of protection, and also to call on the police leadership to remove these members of the institution from their posts, so that they do not exert undue pressure or use their positions to divert the investigations.
On Wednesday, Nicaragua's Supreme Court of Justice endorsed a declaration of the National Assembly urging President Daniel Ortega to denounce the Organization of American States for violating the sovereignty of the Central American nation.
The Supreme Court of Justice agrees, first, to endorse Declaration Number 5 of 2021 of the National Assembly of the Republic of Nicaragua, reaffirming the commitment of all Nicaraguan citizens to the principles on which our nation is based, in particular those of national sovereignty, independence, and self-determination, as inalienable and fundamental rights which belong absolutely and categorically to the people of Nicaragua. Second, to support the request of the National Assembly to the President of the Republic of Nicaragua, Comandante Daniel Ortega Saavedra, in his capacity as head of state and government, to the OAS Charter in accordance with the provisions of Article 143 of the mentioned instrument.
Women who were victims of forced sterilizations between 1996 and the year 2000 in Peru under a program of former dictator Alberto Fujimori denounced new obstacles in the legal proceedings to seek compensation and recognition of the crimes committed against them after the sudden change of the judge leading the case. Judge Rafael Martinez Vargas was due to rule on whether or not to begin criminal proceedings against 7 of the accused, among them Fujimori, when the judiciary pulled him off the case in a sudden move and assigned Magistrate Litman Ramirez Delgado in his place. Several non-governmental organizations and civil rights movements have denounced the move, in addition to the National Coordinator of Human Rights. The case, now including 1,317 plaintiffs, has been closed and reopened several times since 2002. The aim is to hold accountable several members of the Fujimori government for the sterilization without consent of thousands of poor and indigenous women. The latest figures published online by the research site Our World in Data show that 51.73% of the world's population has received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. Vaccination rates differ widely between different world regions. While some nations are already promoting the application of booster doses, others have vaccination rates well below the world average, with no end to the issue of vaccine inequality in sight. At the regional level, South America has an average partial vaccination rate of 70.53%. and North America of 62.6%. By way of comparison, Spain has a rate of 81.6%, the United States of 67.38%, and South Africa of 27.02%. The countries with the highest vaccination rates in the Latin American region are Cuba, Chile, and Uruguay. After a heated debate, German members of parliament passed a bill providing a legal framework to deploy new anti-COVID measures as the country sees a surge in cases. On Thursday, German leaders agreed tough new curbs on the unvaccinated, with plans to prevent them from accessing restaurants, sporting events and cultural shows as the country battles to halt a record rise in COVID infections. With new daily cases soaring to an all-time high of over 65,000, those not immunised are required to provide negative tests in order to use public transport or go to work. The new measures also include compulsory vaccination for healthcare workers and employees in nursing homes. Despite infections soaring in recent weeks, politicians have been accused of inaction and are focusing their attention instead on negotiations to form Germany's next government following the September elections. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Street clashes once again shook Sudan's capital on Thursday, a day after security forces shot dead 15 protesters in the bloodiest day since the military's October 25th takeover. Since General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan detained the civilian leadership and declared a state of emergency, citizens have been protesting, with security forces using violent means to disperse them, including firing tear gas and live bullets. Despite this, many continue to brave the intensifying crackdown that has drawn international condemnation. Thousands took to the streets in the capital and other cities once again on Wednesday, but were met by the deadliest police suppression so far. At least 15 people were killed, most of them in Khartoum, raising the death toll since the coup to 39. On Wednesday, groups supporting asylum seekers reported 10 people had suffocated in an overcrowded boat off the coast of Libya. According to Doctors Without Borders, 10 people were found dead in the lower deck of a severely overcrowded wooden boat 30 miles off the coast of Libya. Survivors said that those who died suffocated after 13 hours on the cramped lower deck, where there had been a strong smell of fuel. On board were asylum seekers from Guinea, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Somalia and Syria. About 1,300 people have died or gone missing while attempting to cross the central Mediterranean so far this year. Since 2014, over 22,000 people have gone missing or died on this route. On Wednesday, a jailed member of the Palestinian movement Fatah died due to lack of attention for his chronic illness. He'd been held in an Israeli prison for over a decade in inhumane conditions. Local media informed that the detainee, identified as Sami al-Amor, was moved on Tuesday from a penitentiary to Soroka Medical Center, where he died a few hours later. Amor was serving a 19-year sentence after his conviction in 2008 by an Israeli court. Over 5,400 Palestinians were detained in the first trimester of 2021 alone by Israeli occupation troops, of which 854 are children and 107 are women. On Wednesday, the United States criticized the Russian government for deploying troops near the border of Ukraine at the same time that the US and NATO escalate their military encirclement of Russia. US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin claimed that the moves of the Russian government, carried out in Russia's own territory, do not favor a climate of security in the region, and stated that the intentions of President Vladimir Putin are unclear. What is clear, however, is the aim of the United States to use Ukraine as part of its attacks on Russia. Russian Minister of Defense Sergei Shoigu responded to the accusations and assured that missiles launched during an anti-satellite drill struck an old satellite with very high precision, in contrast to the claims of the Pentagon chief, which he described as fabrications. And Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday called for dialogue between his Belarusian counterpart Alexander Lukashenko and the country's opposition and expressed support for strengthening ties.
We know that the situation in Belarus has calmed down inside the country, but nevertheless, there are problems, and we are well aware of them. And of course we encourage dialogue between the authorities and the opposition. Russia, for its part, will certainly continue its policy of strengthening ties and deepening integration processes with Belarus.
And the Russian head of state also stressed that the West is escalating the Ukraine conflict by holding drills in the Black Sea and flying bombers near his country's borders.
Our Western partners are escalating the situation by supplying Kiev with lethal modern weapons, conducting provocative military maneuvers in the Black Sea and in other regions near our borders. Our concerns and warnings about NATO's eastward expansion were simply completely ignored.
Over 2 million Kenyans are suffering the consequences of a major drought in the north of the country, which caused President Uhuru Kenyatta to declare a national disaster. Around 300,000 people are directly affected by the lack of water, according to the National Drought Management Authority. The same entity informed that this aggravates the situation of 150,000 children in the region who are suffering from malnutrition. The intensifying drought threatens to leave poor farmers in conditions of starvation, while also deeply harming local wildlife. The situation could trigger displacements as families are forced to travel long distances looking for richer soil and lands more suitable for their livestock. And we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.